Hello, everyone, and welcome to the special edition of Morning Book Buzz. I'm so honored to introduce our first guest speakers for this opening session, Oh, the Horror. Carmen Maria Machado is the author of the forthcoming book, The Low, Low Woods, published by Hill House Comics. She's also the author of the memoir In the Dream House and the short story collection Her Body and Other Parties. She's been a finalist for the National Book Award and winner of numerous awards, including the Lambda Literary Award for Lesbian Fiction, the Brooklyn Public Library Literature Prize, and the National Book Critics Circle's John Leonard Prize. Carmen's essays, fiction, and criticism have appeared in several publications, including The New Yorker, The New York Times, Granta, Guernica, Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy, and Best American Non-Required Reading. She holds an MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop and is the writer in residence at the University of Pennsylvania. Carmen will be in conversation with Grady Hendrix, the novelist and screenwriter based in New York City. He is the author of the Library Reads favorite, The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, as well as Horror Store, My Best Friend's Exorcism, Paperbacks from Hell, and We Sold Our Souls, all of which have received critical praise from numerous outlets, including NPR, The Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, and the Wall Street Journal, and many more. He is a contributor to Playboy, The Village Voice, and Variety. Welcome, Carmen and Grady.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. I never know what to do with my face when people read my bio. What do you do, Carmen? Do you go glassy, or do you try to look thoughtful?
I actually go somewhere completely else. I don't even know how to read. I'm like, who's that they're talking about? I don't know.
It's funny. I actually haven't read The Low, Low Woods yet. Are there review issues out, or?
There's a digital, I believe, digital arcs. I actually don't know the word or what they call it, an arc or galley. This is my first graphic novel.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's what they actually call it, but
something.
Yeah. So the issues themselves are already out in print, but the full book that's going to be like collected, which I've seen. Oh my God, the design of it is going to be so beautiful. It has this like beautiful like vellum cover. It's going to be so pretty. I'm really excited.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I can't imagine anything worse than writing a horror comic book, because you have the visuals, but you don't get to pace the reader like a horror movie would. But at the same time, you can't do it like just plain prose can, which is, you do the Lovecraft, it was unimaginable. You can't even believe how terrible it was. So I don't know how do you thread that needle,
Well, I didn't draw it, which is the first step in a successful
sure.
as me not being the artist. I mean, certainly there is. I mean, it's been really, I don't know if you've ever done any sort of graphic work, but I've
done some graphic novel stuff before.
Yeah, like it's such a different process than writing prose. And like, I remember in the very beginning, like when Joe was sort of helping, I was getting a lot of like, because I should say I started writing it because like they reached out to me and were like, we love your fiction. Have you ever thought about writing a comic? And I was like, yeah, but I don't know one thing about writing comics. And they're like, we'll show you. And I was like, it involves scripts. Like, oh my God, this is like, it was already like way outside of my comfort zone. And I remember like someone telling me, like one of my editors telling me, if you have a surprise in a graphic novel or a comic, you want it on the even number page, because you want to like turn the page, and then there's like a surprise. Like you don't want to have the surprise like on the right page, on the odd numbered page. And I was like, that never would have occurred to me in 10 million years. Like I'm like, you told me that. So so I feel like the whole thing was about adjusting to this whole new way of working, and one of it was like having an artist like trying to describe this thing that I was imagining, and then having an artist render it, which is like a very odd process, but actually really beautiful and really rewarding. And I feel like added this sort of dimension to it that it is like this sort of collaborative thing, right? Where it's like, it's my imagination, but it's also like this artist's skills and her way of interpreting like what I was thinking and what I'm saying. And it was just, I don't know, it was like a really interesting process.
Did you do it fully scripted, like panel by panel?
I did. Yeah. I mean, I sort of like, it's not like a real script. Like, I don't know what kind of, and it does have some like prosy tendencies. Like I do have like, each issue is narrated by the opposite character. So there's two main characters, and
Right.
it's one then the other. And so there is like a narrative voice, which like would be really hard to pull off in like a film unless you had like a voiceover. So there are some like prose tendencies that remain because I like that sort of voicey narration. That's like a thing I really enjoy. But yeah, I had to think visually. Like I was like, okay, in this panel, like we're looking at the girls on their bikes, but but like it's through like a tree or like whatever. Like I had to describe like each panel, but then they would suggest things like the editor or the artist would be like, I was thinking about this panel and I was thinking like, what if we did it from this perspective? And she would like show me like a little drawing, and I'd be like, oh yeah, that sounds great. So it was like collaborative, but I did do it like panel by panel.
Yeah, it just seems like it'd be so hard to control the pacing.
Well, I mean, I had to like outline the whole thing. I mean, yeah, it was a totally like I never outline. Like when I write prose, I tend to just go into my work with a sense of adventure. Like I'm like, what will I find today? I have no idea. And there's this process of discovery that happens when I'm writing. But for this, it's like I had to map out the whole thing. I had to like, here's the arc of the 6 issues, which like was ultimately very helpful when I was like, I was like, oh, I'm glad that I did that for this project in particular, because then it forced me to like have to think about like, and it's also why like I'm not a novelist. Like I write short stories and I write essays, and I have yet to write like a big single fictional project where I have to think and sort of manipulate the structure in that way. So like,
really, you don't think of Dreamhouse that way?
Well, no, because I feel like Dreamhouse is a big cheat because I wrote a bunch of tiny little chapters. It's very. I
know. When I was reading, I was like, "Oh my God, it's like James Patterson doing literary. It's like every page is a new chapter." It was awesome.
Well, it's so funny because also, like, when I wrote that book, like, I wrote the chapters out of order, and then when my editor was like, "Hey, we need to put these in order," I was like, "Can you do it?" And he did. My editor put the whole book in order. Like, I was like, "I can't do it. It's too hard." And he was like, "I got you. This is my job." And he
that's kind of amazing.
And it was funny because I was using Scrivener, so I had all the documents like in the corner, and so he had to download Scrivener, and then I sent him a Scrivener document, and then he was moving it around, and he texted me at some point. It was like, "This is like playing a video game. This is really strange," because he was just moving the bits around.
Scrivener's the best. I just like. I have to use Word whatever because that's what everyone uses once you get to those final drafts.
Sure, same.
It feels like chopping off your hands after using Scrivener.
Well, and I find Scrivener useful like for certain kinds of like for that project it was helpful because I was moving stuff around, and like I feel like for other I didn't use it for my first book, but definitely it was helpful for the memoir. But yeah, so I didn't even really put it in order. So like I don't know. So maybe one day I'll write an actual novel that requires me to like outline the structure beforehand, but like I don't know. Maybe we'll see.
Not broke, don't fix it.
I know right. Exactly.
So wait, were you a comic book kid growing up?
No, not really. When I was a kid, I wanted to read comic books and I wanted to play video games, and I was not allowed to do either. My mother was like very weird about stuff like that, and now I'm like a late in life comic aficionado / video game aficionado. Like, I'm like, aha! Now that I'm 34, I can do whatever I want. Take that.
But did your mom just think they weren't like smart, or they were like low class?
She thought they were gonna rot my brain. She just had ideas. It was like the early '90s, which you've written about so beautifully in your most recent book, and like felt very familiar in a lot of ways. And my mom just had these ideas about TV and about like I was only allowed to watch like PBS and and like and I wasn't really allowed. She had a lot of feelings about movies that had like kids. Like her least favorite thing in children's movies was when kids sass off to adults. Like it made her crazy.
Oh yeah.
She hated it. So I was just a lot of like navigating that as a kid. And I mean like when I was reading prose, she didn't have enough desire to read the books I was reading at the library. So that was like the way that I read. Like I read a lot of stuff I should not have read as a child. Like I read a lot of like V.C. Andrews, like a lot of work that was like really inappropriate for my age because my mom was like, it looks fine, because she didn't want to actually have to read, go through it. She's like, it's a book. How bad could it be? And I was like, oh, you have no idea.
Exactly. But, is V.C. Andrews inappropriate? I feel like 11 is about when people should run across V.C. Andrews and Stephen King. 11, 12.
I mean, I don't know, maybe all the like incest and like graphic sexual activity.
I'm from South Carolina. That's just a family reunion.
I mean, well, that was the thing is I read V.C. Andrews when I was like 11, which I feel like is when a lot of people like run across her books at like they're not young adult books technically, but I feel like a lot of people read them as like young people.
Yeah.
And they were like demented. I mean, they were like truly offensive I remember there was this one series, it was Heaven, and
I haven't read the Heaven series,
Oh, so that was about a girl who gets her drunk father sells her and her brother off for adoption, and then she ends up like having sex with her stepfather. And there's a scene where the stepmother gets so angry when she finds out they're sleeping together that she disembowels her pet hamster in a bathtub, which has stayed with me. Like the image of the disemboweled hamster has stayed with me for so long. And also then there's later the stepmother gets breast cancer, but her breasts are so big that they can't find the cancer in time, and then she dies. So that is also, so there's like several like bits of that book that have stayed with me for literally my entire life, and that's it. So those books are like not for children, but like children read them constantly, and they have this amazing like the window flap.
Yeah, with the die cut. Yeah.
Oh
and the
my
step
God.
back.
If I ever in my life, I'll know I've accomplished something as a writer when I get a die cut cover.
Yeah. When I did Paperbacks from Hell, I wanted a die cut cover so badly. And apparently bookstore buyers hate them because they get damaged.
Oh, because they rip, sure. That makes sense.
So I wasn't allowed to pull one off, but maybe our hopes are on you.
I mean, I must say, your books, I remember reading Horror Store a million years ago and being like, the design of this book, like all your books are so beautiful. And this one I was also admiring that even though it's like traditional prose, like I was like, oh my God, the design of this book is so beautiful. Like,
well, Andy Reid, who's the art director over at Quirk, did that cover, The Peaches, and it is, I hope she got a bonus because like it is very, very hard to draw two peaches that don't look like a piece of the anatomy. Like, it was a butt-biting vampire for about 12 iterations.
Sure, of course. I mean, the cover is, I was just admiring. Yeah, it's just gorgeous.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
So.
No, but it's funny. I think the Heaven series was one that was like Andrew Niederman was already the ghostwriter for V.C. Andrews.
Yeah, because she died after like her second book or something. She died like really early. Yeah.
So I don't even think she'd gotten to that. So that's so weird because like My Sweet Audrina, I don't know if you remember that one. Like,
oh yeah, I remember My Sweet Audrina. No.
That's a V.C. Andrews, and it's one that like, I don't know, man. I'm with John Waters, sort of like good taste is the enemy of art. But like there is no good taste in My Sweet Audrina, but it never feels it never feels sexist, exploitative.
Well, I mean, it's all very like, I mean, it's deeply gothic. Like I feel like it like exists in this tradition, this very sort of female author driven tradition of like the gothic and like this sort of pulpy sensibility that just, I don't know, like it's really, I don't know, they really spoke to me, and I feel like I think about the books a lot, and I'm like, in the sense that like all books that I've read, good and bad, have influenced me, and everything I read and consume like influences me in some way, and I feel like those books were really formative, like in these really interesting ways that like I'll probably never be able to like untangle, like and I'm really glad that I read them, even though when I was 11 I was like, what is that? Oh.
Oh, totally. Well, also, there's something so weird when you're talking about Heaven. Like, can you have breasts so big someone can't detect breast cancer? Like,
I don't know.
To me. I'm not sure that's
like,
accurate.
I don't think it is, but also like once I started developing then I was like, oh my God, I get that breast cancer where they can't find
no one will find it.
I feel like it's like, I don't know if that's true. Like Flowers in the Attic is like a fundamentally insane. Like the premise of all these books are like completely bananas, but like,
oh yeah,
who cares? I mean, I also read like a lot of like Stephen King and R.L. Stine and like Christopher Pike. Like, I mean, I was really on that like.
Christopher Pike is insane. I mean, in the best way.
Yeah. So speaking of Christopher Pike, so of all the things that have stuck with me, like I feel like all these books have like bits that stuck with me, and the Christopher Pike, there was that one book of his whose title I can't remember, but at the very end, the twist is that someone has fed somebody else a hamburger full of ground glass. Do you remember
The Immortals. The
yes,
one
it was
about the Greek
immortals.
goddesses. Yes.
Yes, and they're like, and you're now hemorrhaging in your body, and you're all
Yes.
gonna die. And I remember just being like, whoa, and like literally, whenever I bite into a hamburger, I'm 34 years old. I probably read that book when I was 12, and like I think about it every time. Like, I hope this hamburger is not full of ground glass that will slowly kill me. Like,
I hope I'm not a
Pike novel.
reincarnated immortal Greek goddess who's being poisoned.
I hope that too. Yeah.
Yeah. No, R.L. Stine's
yeah.
funny because he's a little sleepy. Like, I'm not a huge R.L. Stine fan. Like, every chapter ends with someone being like, "Oh my God," and turning around. It's just someone being like, "Oh, you dropped your wallet, lady." And it's always like she woke up, there was a dead body next to her bed, and the next chapter's like, it was the shirt she'd taken off the night before. Like, but Christopher Pike is seriously unhinged in such an amazing way.
Well, he was like R.L. Stine, but sexy. Like, I feel like that, it was like there was this level of sex appeal to Christopher Pike that R.L. Stine was a little for like a slightly younger audience, I think.
Yeah. Well, Christopher Pike kids are always going to parties and getting drunk and doing cocaine and having sex and
Exactly, yeah.
And there was always this. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, that wasn't happening in R.L. Stine was like, I got a camera and it kills people or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, and there was also this thing with Christopher Pike that was like, I always found very liberating, like, you're a teenager, but you might be a reincarnated ancient Egyptian goddess, or maybe you're an alien or a serial killer. We don't know. You could be a robot from the future. Like, teens could be anything.
Did you ever read Lois Duncan? Were you a Lois Duncan fan?
Lois Duncan I run hot and cold on. Like, I find some of her straight up thrillers a little bit pat. But Daughters of Eve, I think, is amazing.
Daughters of Eve I remember reading her. So, like, I loved her when I was a teen, and I wrote it when she died a few years ago. I wrote this piece for the New Yorker about it because she was so formative for me. And I remember her, and I think of her, like, rereading her for that article, I kept thinking of, like, I feel like she's got this, like, weird, like, Shirley Jackson-ish energy that I think is, like, really interesting. And, like, also, like, her personal life. Do you know the story of, like, her personal
with her
life?
daughter?
With her daughter, yeah. So I remember when I was a kid, like, reading all her books that I could find and really loving them, and then, like, reading that book where she believes that, like, her daughter was, like, killed by a conspiracy and that, like, she predicted her daughter's death and all these, like, really intense things, and, like, how that, like, shaped her and kind of, like, I don't know, like, it was, like, really sad and tragic. And I remember being, like, I was so young when I read it, but I was just, like, this is, like, bigger than it was, like, feelings and emotions and situations that, like, felt, like, really huge to me in this way that I had never encountered before. But her books, Daughters of Eve is, like, that image of that final image of the girl hitting her father with the frying pan, like, also has stuck with me for a million years. Yeah, and, like, I don't know.
And it's also, it's weird too, because with Lois Duncan, like, everyone saw her processing her grief in as close to real time as you could get, like, as she wrote these books about it, which really I found there was an urge to avert my eyes, but also this kind of amazing. It's a little bit like Anne Rice. I mean, she wrote Interview with the Vampire. Complete alcoholic train wreck right after her 5-year-old daughter had died of leukemia. I mean, no wonder that first book is such a tremendous bummer. It's like amazing as sexy as it is.
I mean, I feel like there is something really interesting about reading a piece of writing that has that sense. And I feel like it's like this je ne sais quoi. It's like a thing you can't put your finger on, but it's like, I feel like I'm reading something that's like cut from somebody's like emotional soul cloth.
Yeah.
In this way that like maybe another book, while maybe more technically accomplished, would not feel that same way. And it's like you're getting this sort of unfiltered, and there's a nakedness to it. I think it's like very disarming, but also very addictive, especially when you're a kid and you're like, what's the world offer me? Like, I'm hunting down, like, I just want to know, like, what's out there? What's out there in the world? Oh my God, it's like,
it's crazy.
It's crazy. It's horrible. Like, the world is terrifying. Yeah. And I feel like for me, like, I was always hunting that down as a kid. Like, that was like the thing that I was always moving toward, and I grew up in the suburbs. Like, I didn't experience any major tragedies as a child. Like, I was really just like hunting this like emotional, this like main line of like emotional truth, like human experience. And
well, it's the same like as a kid, you get in a car, hey, we're going to this party. You don't know these guys. Okay, sure. I want something real to happen to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's interesting too because I look at someone like Stephen King who's just so prolific, and that becomes its own kind of rawness, in the sense of
Mm.
like I was if you look at The Shining, he wrote the first draft of that in something like 6 weeks. And when you look at the word count, you're like, so you're writing 4,000, 5,000 words a day, 7 days a week? Like, that's
Mhm.
automatic writing at a certain point. Like, that's just, he's not an outliner. That's just like, bang.
He's really interesting. Yeah, and I like you. I run really hot and cold on Stephen King. Like I
Me
feel
too.
like some of his work is like really amazing. Some of it I've tried and I've been like, eh. But like
Yeah.
I do. I remember when I read like that some of his books he has no memory of writing them because he was like on a cocaine bender. I was like,
Yeah.
that tracks to me.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it's also interesting to read the stuff he wrote when he was recovering from the getting hit by the
right.
van, because his way
Mhm.
of writing about pain suddenly gets so much more on the body and so much
Yeah.
realer. It's
Yeah.
really interesting.
I
Uh,
mean, I feel like that's the real beauty of like getting to read like an author's total oeuvre, or getting to read
yeah,
like across like watching and like reading an author's like body of work and knowing kind of what was happening in their life and seeing the way that like writing is shaped by like like the stuff that's going on in your how it's changing, like how it's reflecting like real
yeah,
life stuff. I don't know. I always find that exercise very interesting.
yeah.
Um,
Well, it was also. Did you read either of the Shirley Jackson biographies, the Ruth Franklin
I
or the
read the Ruth. I read
before?
the Ruth Franklin one. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the one before it's good too. It actually covers different stuff, but it was really interesting to go back to her work after reading like a
Mm.
big. I'm a big Shirley Jackson junkie, and like, you
I
know,
assumed so with the James Harris character,
oh
and
yeah, thank you, nicely
I
spotted.
I
Yeah,
was like reading that, and I was like, is that on purpose? I actually I was like googling. I was like, what? I was like, that must be on purpose. That'd be a very weird coincidence. But yeah.
well, yeah, but also like there's some authors I sort of adapt when I'm writing or adopt when I'm writing a book, and for me, like I read Life Among the Savages and Raising
Mm,
Demons like twice each when I was writing Southern Book Club, just because she's great, and I think those books
yeah.
are really under appreciated. But
Mhm.
you look at sort of like just how lonely she was in her life, in her marriage, where her kids are
Yeah.
age-wise, when she wrote Hill House, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh my God, of course, whatever walks there walks alone. It's lonely. That's
Yeah.
hell for Shirley Jackson to be alone. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. It's just really, I felt very like, oh, it all makes sense to me.
Yeah, no, no, no. I completely agree. And I actually just reread Hill House when the pandemic started. His friend and I were having a phone chat, and every day I
Uh,
would read them a little piece of Hill House. And I had never read it out loud before. I'd only ever read it, to myself.
oh,
There was something really like profound and interesting about hearing it out loud and like hearing it in my mouth and like I don't know. And that novel is so good. I mean, it's my favorite. It's like basically my
yeah.
favorite ever. But
Well,
yeah.
that and Toni Morrison's Beloved, I think. I mean, those are the two
Mm.
horror novels for the 20th century, kind of period, full stop.
Totally. I actually taught a haunted house class at Penn a couple years ago, and we did like I taught Hill House, I taught Beloved, and like a bunch of
Yeah.
other. Like I don't know if you've ever. Oh, have you ever read The House Next Door by Anne
Oh,
Rivers?
Anne River Siddons. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
great.
it's so good. I taught that one too. Though the students really struggled with that one. They like were not crazy about that book, but
Why not?
I
I'm
loved
kind of
that.
curious.
Well, I think it was because the book has so much like it's dealing with a lot of like it's because I also it's from the 70s, which I feel like when you
Yeah.
read it, it's so fresh. Like it doesn't feel dated except for like a case. And then you read it and you're like, oh, so it's like stuff about like anti-Semitism and like homosexuality, but like written by
Right.
somebody in the South in the 70s. So like I think the students felt a little like stressed out about some of the things that happen in the book.
Oh,
But I find that book unbelievably riveting and like I always think about when because that's her only horror novel, right? Like she's
yeah.
written mostly like stuff, And I was there's this really good H.P. Lovecraft has this essay about horror that I teach where he talks about how like sometimes cosmic horror is so intense that writers who otherwise don't write horror will write like one horror novel because they have to like discharge this like cosmic horror energy. So he talks about like
Oh, nice.
Henry James writing like the
Yeah.
Turn of the Screw. So this idea that like some writers like they mostly don't write horror, but then every so often it's like the horror of existential fear like it's so
Yeah.
intense that like they have to be like, I gotta write a horror novel to like get all that, like all the willies out or whatever. And I feel like that novel feels that way to me, where it feels like there's something so like disturbing about it, and I love it.
Well, and it's so. Have you read any of her other books?
I haven't. I mean, I after I read that book, I was like, what else has she written? And like everything else I've read about, I was like, nothing that. I mean, it sounds like interesting, but like nothing that like I felt very drawn to.
But it's interesting to read one of her other books because they're often set with sort of these yuppie characters in the southern suburbs.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, like you said, it's like she wrote these books and suddenly like just built up this like chart because it's really constructed of the same pieces, just used for sort of nefarious ends, you know?
Totally, absolutely. Oh my God, yeah. And I remember like reading it and being like, I don't know. Some people really hate reading books about like rich people being idle, but I'm like, I love nothing more than reading novels about rich people being idle and like being terrible. And I was like, I will happily read this novel about like these rich white people like doing blow and like fucking all day. Like, I'm totally fine reading a novel like that, and then also like maybe the house next door is haunted.
Exactly.
That feels I'm like, I will read 50 novels about that.
Yeah, why else is Keeping Up with the Kardashians and like Succession popular? Like
right, exactly. That's why I thought watching Succession too. I'm like, God, I could watch this for 50 million years.
Oh yeah. So I think they're about to tap dance us off stage.
Great. Okay, they're gonna yank us off. Yeah, you too, man. 90s horror. I will talk about this all day long.
I know, me too.
Well, thanks everyone for coming, and I hope you enjoyed the chat.
Thank you so much, Grady and Carmen. Carmen Maria Machado's forthcoming book is The Low, Low Woods, publication of Hill House Comics. And Grady Hendrix's most recently Library Reads loved book is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Quirk Books.
You guys, thank you so much. We knew that you were going to wake everybody up and get them going. If we had like horror panel bingo, anybody had incest, disbowelment, anatomy of peaches, you are the winner.
Excellent.
All about winning.
Thank you for waking us up. We knew that you would. I knew that you two would get along so well. So I'm so glad. So thank you guys so much for starting us off today.
Excellent, of course.
We'll talk to you soon. Good luck with everything and stay safe.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. We just wanted to make sure you were all